Behringer announced the MS-5. And not to be outdone, Yamaha announced the CK range. It seems the announcements from the manufacturers are starting to come in thick and fast, pushing this year's new technology onto us poor musicians. I say that very tongue-in-cheek because we're always looking for the next big hit, especially if you're a keyboardist. And this week's notable announcements came through from that stalwart Behringer company who announced the MS-5 had reached the next milestone. And not to be outdone, Yamaha have also now started pushing their CK range of stage keyboards. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. So it basically seems that as soon as we finish talking about one Behringer announcement, we get another one. I think there's probably going to be a series of announcements come through, and I suppose the soothsayers amongst us will start saying that Behringer are never going to release all these prototypes that they are announcing. I kind of think that's probably not correct. I think the majority of these are going to make it through to the market. I think people are clamouring for these particular reimaginations. So this is all about the Behringer MS-5. Now, last time we heard anything about this particular synth was about a year ago when Behringer published photographs of the bench prototypes at that point in time. Now, prior to this, probably about summer 2021, they stated that they were starting to work on an MS-5 or an RS-5 clone, should I say, which was the Roland model that this is cloned off of. But kind of gave you some visuals about it. I wasn't quite sure whether it was a Behringer MS-5 at that point or whether it was a Roland MS-5 that had some changes made to it, if you get my drift. But effectively, we've been told for the last 2 years that this machine was being thought about. As I say, last year we had the prototype, so it had moved forward, and now we're being told that it's been moved forward again. It's reached the next stage in its evolution. What have we been told in this announcement? Well, actually, we've been told pretty much naff all in this announcement, if I'm honest. What we were told last summer, though, was that this reimagined synth would feature 2 VCOs with 4 patterns: triangle, ramp, square and pulse, 2 VCAs, 2 filters, 2 envelope patterns, and that would be then combined with an SH style mixer with ring modulation, and could also accept external signals into that mixer that you could then pass through the circuitry. That's pretty much all we were told. Pretty much mirrors what the RS5 SH5 could do. So they've been pretty faithful. We were also told that it was a mono machine, not a polyphonic machine, which also again pays homage to the machine that it's being cloned off of. And what you will notice if you look at the photographs, which should be appearing there, is that the keyboard looks, or the actual style of the machine looks very poly D orientated. And what Behringer said is they're trying to keep down production costs and therefore reusing what they already have or what they've already developed, so therefore to keep the costs down to the likes of you and I. Good point, bad point, leave your comments below. And the other thing that they've announced is that this model, or the model they were playing with last year, had no patch memory. So effectively you were dialing in the sound, and once you changed that dialed in sound, you lost that patch unless you had recorded down what the settings were. So this comes back to the old scribing that you used to do in the sort of 70s and early 80s, with the mono synths, where you effectively had a piece of paper that had all the dials, and with a felt tip pen you would go along and mark the positions of the dials, and that was your patch editor. Well, where are we now with this particular synthesizer? Well, they've told us that it has completed development. It's being sent out to beta testers for real world testing, as opposed to the Behringer bench engineer testing that it's been going through for the past however many months. And they've also stated that once it completes beta testing, so they're not expecting to find anything major during this, it's probably going to be more around tweaking sound, it's going to move straight into a production phase. Now, what does that mean? Well, my guess is this thing will be hitting the streets probably late May, early June, maybe a little bit later, but definitely summer 2023. Funny enough, it coincides with all the NAMM stuff that has been, because NAMM has obviously been pushed back this year, and I think there's going to be a whole host of announcements at NAMM from all the manufacturers, and I think this is one of those ones that's going to appear at NAMM in pretty much completed format. Now, this one I think is going to be one of those synths for the monophonic lead synth fans out there who've got the cash to spend. I don't think it's going to be a particularly expensive synth to go and buy. I think it's going to probably be in the bracket of the Poly D. And if Behringer stay true to form with some of the other stuff they've released in the last few years, I suspect the sound is going to be there or thereabouts to the original, a fairly faithful reconstruction. We now move on to the Yamaha announcement, which was the CK series of stage keyboards. I keep calling this the CX range of keyboards. I don't know why. It seems more logical than the CK range of keyboards, but it is the CK range of keyboards. Now, the first thing that strikes you about this keyboard, if you go and see it in person, lift it up. The guy who was doing the demo I saw the other day basically lifted up the 88 note keyboard with one hand. And all I can say is try doing that to a Kronos or a Nautilus 61. Basically, you can forget about lifting a Kronos 88 or a Nautilus 88 with one hand. Not going to happen. But try it with a 61. You'd even struggle there. So this is an 88 key keyboard, and it is light as they come, apparently. Now, what Yamaha have said is that the range currently comes in 2 flavours. Now, I think on my Instagram post earlier in the week, I said it comes in 3 flavours. I was mistaken. There is no middle range flavour for this keyboard. It comes in a 61 note, what they've called Synth Action Keyboard, referred to as FSB, who I thought were the Russian intelligence agency, or was it the German intelligence agency before the wall came down. But in Yamaha's sense, the FSB is Future System Basic Keyboard, and an 88, what they've described as graded hammer action keyboard. And I'm quite intrigued with the fact that it's a graded action hammer keyboard and it's as light as it is, because all the hammer action keyboards that I possess, the hammer action keyboard is what makes that keyboard fairly heavy. Apart from with the Roland A80, of course, it's the sort of I mean, it's built like a tank, so it's heavy anyway. But that's what they've said, and they've basically stated that this stage keyboard is aimed at the artist that needs to get up and go. Read into that what you will with the following comments. Now, it comes loaded with sounds from the CP piano series, specifically the piano and organ sounds, and it also comes loaded with YC stage keyboard sounds, which is the bigger brother, if you like, of this keyboard. And the YC sounds are more synth orientated as opposed to piano and organ, which is pinching off the CP. Now, what I don't see sorry, I've got the hiccups. I don't see this keyboard as a replacement for the CP. But about £500 less money than the YC keyboard. What I do see is it as direct competition to that YC range. It's cheaper and it's lighter and it's more transportable. This is the sort of keyboard that you would put in a material bag and sling it over your shoulders. That's the kind of impression I get. Whereas a normal keyboard, I would struggle putting in a material bag and sling it over my shoulders for fear of getting boshed or binged in transit. Now, in designing the keyboard, it looks like Yamaha have taken a good look at the interface. And one of the outstanding features I pulled up from the demo that I saw was the fact that when you go in to change a sound, what you have is universal controls on the keyboard. So the controls effectively are affecting the sound that you have selected. But so you know which sound you actually are working with, what they've done is when you press that particular sound, all the keys change to the colour of that sound, being it blue or red or yellow or whatever, or white for argument's sake, so you know what sound you're editing. Now I just saw that as a really, really nice touch, especially if you're working in dim lighted environments, which is what most gigging you musicians do, of course, is you can't see jack whatever when you're standing at the back of the stage with no lights on you. So I did see that as a really quite nice feature. Now, again, what seems to be popular with stage keyboards at the moment is the fact that they have the drawbars, and the drawbars are specifically set up for the kind of the organ functions. So that is really there to make sure that the moment you hit that B3 patch, you can control the aspects of that particular patch. I suppose those are the kind of two key things I took, or the key things I took away from this. Apart from this one, which I always find a little surprising, why manufacturers are including speakers on keyboards that they expect to be semi-pro. I do find that a bit surprising, because I don't think you get the clarity out of these speakers that you would get out of amplification. But on the flip side, the demo of the speakers was actually pretty good, although I reserve the right to go and see what it sounds like actually when you're standing in front of the machine without headphones on. Now, the other thing that was really interesting about these two keyboards, the 61 and the 88 key versions, is they run on batteries. In fact, they run on 8 AA batteries. Now, for those of you who don't know what a AA looks like, I reach behind me to my battery rack. That is a AA battery. So 8 of those, and you can run one of these keyboards. Yes, interesting, isn't it? What they don't say in the literature, and I can find no reference, is if you're running on batteries and using the internal speakers, how much life do you get? The internal speakers only consume 6 watts a side, and that's assuming that you're running them flat out. But I don't see how long you can run the keyboard on batteries and using the speakers. That would be an interesting one. But I suppose if you're not running it on speakers and you are actually using some sort of external amplification, i.e. battery driven amp or something like that, then I suspect this thing will run for quite a while on batteries. You know, probably several hours, at least get you through a gig. But be prepared to have a couple of boxes of 8 batteries in your carry bag, because you're going to have to change these on a regular basis. At least at the beginning of the gig, anyway, should I say. So the question really is, who is this feature aimed at? And I sort of did some thinking about this, and the sort of kind of, I suppose in my industry, with the use cases that we would come up with here is, you know, acoustic solo groups that play outside, you know, doing things like, you know, playing in the arboretum for wedding guests, or playing in a function where you're kind of playing in an area where there's little to no power available. I can see that. I can also see buskers taking the CK range as a serious alternative to when they're playing out in the streets or down in the tube station at midnight. Sorry, I had to get the Jam reference in there. I can see those, but other than that, I'm never really sure who would be using the speakers. I've got speakers on the Jupiter X that I own, and I don't think I've ever used them, if I'm honest, because I always have the keyboard amped up. I find it actually easier to control that way, but that's just me. So the bottom line is, it's kind of been interesting looking at these two new instruments. It has. But personally, I can see no circumstances when I'd use actually either of them. Looking at the MS-5, it could change once I hear how fat a recreation of the I've written this down wrong in my notes. The SH-5. I'm sitting there thinking, it's not that. The SH-5. But I really think the lack of patch recall on this synthesizer, at the end of the day, it's being software driven. So the lack of patch memory on this synth I see as a bit daft. If it really is, what I'm reading is really true, why would you do it in the modern era when it would be so easy just to put an LCD display on it with some sort of patch recall and a twiddly knob? I kind of, I see that as a bit of a deal breaker for me personally, and I just don't have the time at the moment to spend recreating patches that I created and then writing them down. But that's kind of where I am at the moment. So the SH-5, I'm afraid, sounds like it's a no-go for me. I think it'll be a great synthesizer for those that enjoy that sort of monophonic, twiddly knobs, ring modulation style music making, but not me. And if I go and look at the CK88 or the CK66, now the demo was done on the CK88, and okay, in demos the whole idea of the demo is to make the keyboard sound good, and I have to be honest and say the guy who was doing the demonstration did exactly that. He made it sound extremely good. And unlike the the MS-5, it's available now. Go onto the local portal if you want one. You can see it. Currently, I think it's sitting around about the £1,000 mark in the UK. But again, I've got no use for it in my collection or in my usage. I don't gig. I don't need I don't need portability. Pretty much everything I have is currently stored or currently in storage because I don't have space. So I wouldn't be buying that one either. And even if I did have space, I can see better things to spend my money on. Thinking specifically of the UBXA, which I expect to see an announcement for pretty soon, after Behringer announced that it was going into production soon. So I'd rather spend my £1,000 on the UBXA rather than spend my £1,000 on this particular keyboard. Anyway, as always, these are my views on these two new instruments, but I encourage you to go to your local music store. I always say go to your local music store and support what they do, because if you don't go and buy it from your local music store, there won't be a local music store for too much longer. Don't buy everything through the portals, and don't think you're actually getting a better deal through the portals. I'm always a stalwart for the two that I use, which is Anderton's in Guildford and Absolute in Bournemouth. Both of them are very large facilities with lots and lots of choice and a number of very knowledgeable people staffing the particular environments, whether it be the drum shacks, the keyboard shrines, or the myriads of guitars and acoustics and electrics and bass and 12 strings and dual interface and whatever else you guitarists love. But yeah, please go to the stores. I know with Anderton's in Guildford, I'm not so sure with Absolute, but I think it's still it's the same policy. What you pay in the store is what you pay online, and they are extremely competitive. And on that note, live long and prosper. Catch you later. Bye bye.